You've undoubtedly heard a lot in the news lately about network neutrality.
Now to net neutrality, which has a lot of us here scratching our heads. Basically, the FCC can now regulate how internet service providers are managing their networks, but what does that really mean to any of us?
There has been extensive debate about whether net neutrality should be required by law, particularly in the United States. The Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, is currently deciding how to handle the issue. Hi, I'm Professor Mark Grabowski. This brief video lecture will discuss what exactly is network neutrality and why should you care? We'll hear from experts on both sides of the issue. First, here's a 90-second explanation of what is network neutrality and why is it such a big deal?
Net neutrality comes from the idea that all information on the internet is treated equally. Data is transmitted over the internet in packets and flows freely through all networks between you and the source of the data. We currently have an open internet, and ISPs distribute data neutrally. That means whether you want access to Facebook, Netflix, or YouTube, the ISP will deliver all data packets with the same preference. In a non-neutral internet, an ISP can ask an application provider, such as Facebook, to pay an additional fee to deliver their data packets faster. Facebook could buy this preferential treatment, giving them an edge over their competition and pushing other sites out of the market. On the other hand, given that they do not comply, an ISP can greatly reduce the speed in which their data is delivered. This also opens the possibility for ISPs to act in an anti-competitive manner. A cable ISP could slow down access to Netflix to promote its own digital television service. One of the biggest legislative decisions regarding net neutrality came in January of 2014. The lawsuit between Verizon and the FCC emerged as part of a plan by Verizon to begin selling metered internet packages similar to those of cellular data plans. The court did not oppose the idea of net neutrality. The FCC lost because they had attempted to apply common carrier neutrality rules, but had refused to categorize broadband ISPs as common carriers. FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler has recently announced that the Commission will introduce a new plan pushing net neutrality on the regulatory side. However, companies like AT&T have already filed patents outlining a tiered internet pricing model.
So why is network neutrality so important? Let's hear first from an organization that's advocating for network neutrality.
What is net neutrality? Net neutrality is the equal treatment of all data, just like these data packets. Net neutrality means that users like us should decide which devices, software, services and websites are used.
I'm different.
Net usage should be open and without any third party telling us what will and won't work. Why should you care? Because it is an awesome thing from which you benefit every day, and because this awesome thing is currently endangered. A neutral network shows no discrimination towards the sender, content, or receiver of sent data packets. It doesn't make any difference which rate the sender and receiver are paying, or what kind of application or protocol sends or receives the packet. Or, in simpler terms, imagine the web as a road on which data packets are moving. This road connects all computers that are connected to the internet. On the crossroads of these streets are routers, which direct the data packets on the right route to their destination. The routers don't care who comes down the road, nor do they care how they look, where they are from, where they want to go, or what content they have with them. This way, I can communicate directly with my friends, even if they're living on a different continent, pay different rates, or have a different provider than me. I can access the internet to visit any website or play any game, no matter who is offering them or where the hosting servers are located. I can watch any video or read blogs from all over the world, and I can take part in initiatives and open source projects. I can do all this whether I'm using a tablet, laptop, PC, or mobile device to access the internet. This is what the internet is all about. This is the way we expect it to work. We all benefit, as a community, from these neutral communication networks. They guarantee our access to all available content on the World Wide Web. Because of this system, the network providers have earned billions in the last several years. Net neutrality, an awesome idea for all of us. So, what is the catch? The telecommunication providers now make the claim that these imaginary data roads could experience traffic jams. They want to abolish the concept of net neutrality. Of course, this isn't true. Data networks are not real roads. As we know from the hardware manufacturers of the network infrastructure, there is in fact enormous untapped capacity in the network. Not to mention, operators of content distribution networks tell us that data traffic is unbelievably cheap. Why are telecommunication companies making these claims?
For years, our connection providers have been jealously looking at the biggest profit centers of the internet's service providers: content providers, search engines, video platforms, and social networks.
They all want their share of these profits as the digital age reduces traditional revenue streams. Now they want not only to transport data, they also want to exert power and control on whatever is offered. So, how do they want to do that? To achieve this, the telecommunication providers have considered splitting the data into categories, or rather castes. The lowest caste of this system would be the regular internet, which would only be available for a limited amount of data and would have to take a back seat to higher castes when being sent through the data network. The highest caste contains content from the net provider, segregated from the internet, and would receive preferential treatment and unlimited access, naturally, all through an extra subscription. Between these two, many other priority levels are possible. For example, a caste for data from social networks that raises a traffic data toll for the social network provider. This, of course, means that the receiver will have to pay for an extra subscription as well. In the same manner, an extra service to provide games for consoles or reading online newspapers could be implemented. They would be separate from the internet, and both the distributor of the service and their customers could be charged for it. Competitive offers would be restricted or blocked. So, how does this work? Let us go back to imagining the data network as roads. The router, which originally directed data to the right route, would be upgraded with toll stations that scan through the data packets and separate them by castes. Depending on the caste, the data packets could use a special road that was separated from the main road in order to reach their destination faster. However, if the toll was paid for data of a lower caste, they would have to use the slower, regular road. If no payment for the data was made by the sender, it would be assigned to a lower caste and would only be allowed to use the street if it was empty and not too many data packets had passed through the toll station. Should the data packets be part of programs, services, content, or senders that were not liked by the telecommunication provider, they would be slowed down excessively, sorted through, and possibly even destroyed. Moreover, if this was not clear, we customers do always pay, no matter if a service provider pays toll as a sender or not. Therefore, our data traffic might get limited, and we would have to pay for more data traffic subscriptions. So, what does this mean? Non-commercial services and community projects, like Wikipedia for example, could not afford this caste toll and would have limited availability, or not be available at all. Direct communication with friends and acquaintances could be filtered or blocked as a rival to established models of service and commerce. Once such a control and filter infrastructure is introduced and established, filtering and discarding of unwelcome data, like competitive offers or services, could be done easily. Filtering opinions, information, or political viewpoints is just a small change in the system settings. What if we let infringement of net neutrality happen? Such a process is very difficult to reverse, if it's possible at all. We would lose the richness of the internet, the variety of options through which we shape the net. We would lose much content, because providers cannot afford the toll of the telecommunication enterprise anymore. We would lose the free competition, and by this, the release of new services of smaller companies or community projects. The free access to content and information that we currently enjoy would be gone. There would be a 2, 3, or 4-class model of the internet, or even, not just one internet, but many, and different content would be available in different nets. Think of it like a set of TV channels from a pay TV provider, where in addition to basic programs, there are premium programs that are charged differently depending on the channel. You could only access whatever the providers offered and expected to be profitable. The network operator's regime would severely limit today's freedom of information on the internet, and for this loss, we would have to pay more. However, our providers say that they would never do such a thing. It is just something like a rise in price. But of course, the telecommunication providers have been proven to lie right to our faces when making arguments against net neutrality. For example, the claim of non-available capacity, or that countries with laws for net neutrality would have a slower internet connection. If they're already lying at this point, Why would they tell the truth by promising to build a faster net with the additional money, while claiming they will not sift through our data, even though they need it in order to make the caste system work? How can they possibly keep the richness and the competition with such a system? Therefore, protest with us. Request statutory regulations for net neutrality in your country and in the EU. Demand equal treatment of data. Reject preferential treatment of premium data in exchange for a worse treatment of your personal data. Stand up against network locks and an artificial deceleration. Fight for a free and open communication network, which we together as a community benefit from. Demand non-manipulated data traffic. Reject the discrimination or prioritizing of data, no matter what the reason. Nobody has the right to be snooping in our traffic. Nothing justifies it. We are all entitled to net neutrality, even in mobile networks. Real net, now and in future.
Perhaps now you're thinking, oh, network neutrality is really necessary. The ISPs are so evil for trying to oppose it. Well, let's hear their side of the story. Here's an expert arguing why network neutrality is a bad idea.
There's basically two premises with which we have to be concerned. The first one is basically, okay, you and I live next door to one another. You're downloading a movie, I'm updating my Twitter account. Obviously, at that moment, you need more bandwidth, more internet than I do. So what the internet service provider does is, quote, manage the network. They say, okay, you get more internet than Seaton does right now, but later you're done with their movie, so they move it over to me. Comcast gets 1 million URL requests a second, and they manage it. So it's very impressive for them to do that. Net neutrality says you can't do that anymore. It turns the internet into dumb tubes. It's socialism for the internet. Everybody gets equal amounts of nothing. It's not unlike telling the fire company, okay, that guy's house is burning down. The guy next door is brushing his teeth, but you get equal amounts of water for both houses. That's one facet. The second facet of net neutrality that's problematic is, okay, say you need to mail a package. You go into Federal Express. You can mail it in 7 days. You can mail it in 3 days. Obviously, you pay more for the faster service, but there's 9 million examples in the private sector where you do that. First class versus coach on a plane, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Net neutrality says you can't do that either. It tells the hospital that needs to download its MRI for its dying patient, you don't get any more bandwidth, no matter what you pay, than the guy next door who's downloading the Panda Sneezes video on YouTube. So what it is, okay, so you ask, you hear this and go, why are they doing this? What is the purpose of doing this? Because it's an assault on the industry to affect an ideological outcome. One of the problems is everyone hears tech and hears net neutrality and internet and interwebs and starts glazing over and doesn't pay attention. What you have to realize is these are media Marxists, and they're Marxists. And what they want to do to the internet is no different than what they want to do to the healthcare industry, no different than what they want to do to the financial industry. This is an assault on the industry to affect an ideological outcome. There's a man by the name of Robert McChesney. He's an avowed Marxist. He is also a college professor. Please pardon the redundancy. He is he's the godfather of the media quote-unquote reform movement. His objective of net neutrality, and I'm going to quote him, not directly, but it's close, is the net neutrality is the necessary first step in eradicating the media capitalists from the phone and cable companies and divesting them from control. How very Hugo Chavez of him. So the purpose of net neutrality isn't to create neutrality. It's to create an untenable economic environment for private investment, which will subsequently be followed by government investment, at which point government becomes the sole internet service provider. And at that point, if you're a conservative website or a small government website, how's your downloads going to be? How's the government going to treat your traffic vis-a-vis newrepublic.org or not, whatever New Republic's website address is, or Salon or Mother Jones or, MoveOn.org? How are their websites going to be treated vis-a-vis? Because you're going to have rationing of bandwidth, just like you're going to have rationing of healthcare. And then the government gets to choose winners and losers. And guess who's going to be winning? The big government folks. So anyway, the point is, going back to the net neutrality argument, when you heard about when the stimulus bill got passed, of all the atrocious things, one of the atrocious things to come out of it was the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, was charged with coming up with a national broadband plan, which they did, the initial numbers of which were upwards of $350 billion. When people like myself and others said, whoa, $350 billion? They said, oh, it's 20 to 350 billion. It's a range. And I said, that's a heck of a range. But the point being, if your objective is to drive the media capitalists and their investment out of the sector and replace it with government, $350 billion is a pretty good down payment, is it not? So that's the point of net neutrality. The point is to create a situation so untenable and so unworkable that all the private investment will dry up and go away because they can't get a return. At which point, somebody needs to come in and ride in and save the day, and that's government. And that's why net neutrality exists. That's why it's been created or thought up or dreamed up in 2002, 2003. And that's the objective of net neutrality, is to slam down the door on the effective free speech, free market xanadu we have, make it untenable to make any money on the money you put in. And let's face it, it's hundreds of billions of dollars, which means you need to get a pretty good return on your investment if you're going to ante up hundreds of billions of dollars. It's economics of scale. If you're only going to invest $10, you don't mind making $2. But you don't want to make $2 if you put in $100 billion. There's better ways to spend your money. So the purpose is to shut down private investment and replace it with government. And then not only does so right now we're fighting a free market fight against net neutrality. But the free market fight very quickly begets a free speech fight once the net neutrality proponents start getting what they want, which is more government involvement in internet service providing, because then they get to start choosing, okay, this website does better than this website, this content does better than this content. To argue that the media capitalists, the people investing the hundreds of billions of dollars now, are more likely to control content than the government is patently absurd, because if you don't like Verizon, go to Comcast. If you don't like Comcast, go to AT&T. You only got one government. And if they're running the roost, they're a built-in monopoly, and they get to choose content, and once they're choosing content, you're done. Look, it's taken hundreds of billions of dollars to get to the point we are now, and the evolution in the last 10 years has been extraordinary. 28K dial-up to high-speed bandwidth now in 10 years is unbelievable. Never in the history of the world have we had this much advancement in one sphere as we have in the internet. And the reason that's happened is because there's virtually no regulation. They're wide open to do whatever they need to do to get the job done. They have to answer to their customers. They're in a constant battle with one another to deliver the new cool thing. Look at the phones, look at the service, all of that. All of that is generated by competition, and that competition begets a lot of investment. If they slam down net neutrality, it's the little Dutch boy with his finger in the dike of private investment. It's the Dorian Gray Act of the internet. If you like the internet the way it looks right now, slam down net neutrality and it'll look like that forever. It's reminiscent of the car situation in Cuba. Everybody's driving 1950s cars because that was the last time they could afford cars, and now they're held together with chewing gum and baling wire. That's the way the internet's going to look. And it's not going to be like tomorrow. The vote's the 21st of December. It's not like on the 22nd it's going to be awful. But that's not how it's going to go. It's going to be a degradation. It's not going to go from 60 miles an hour to 0 miles an hour. It's going to 60 to 55, then 55 to 50. And 50 to 45. The healthcare situation, and people understand this, and the parallels to the healthcare Obamacare regulation are very, very good and pertinent. It's not that the healthcare system is going to be bad the day after things start getting enacted. Thank goodness they haven't been yet. But we're already seeing reactions to this bad policy. The premiums that Obama said were going to go down have dramatically gone up. The people are dropping their employees from their benefits. They're not going to cover them anymore because they can't afford them. All these things that are happening to the internet, to healthcare, will happen to the internet. And it'll happen more and more, because what will happen is as net neutrality becomes more the law of the land and becomes longer enforced, more people are going to be dropping their investment. More people are going to be degrading their service. And it's not going to be all at once. It's going to be gradual. It's going to be ongoing, and it's going to be perpetual.
So there you have it. We've now heard from both sides of the network neutrality issue. To be fair, both sides have probably overstated their case. It's unlikely that the worst-case scenarios envisioned by either expert will come true. But what do you think? Do you support network neutrality, or are you opposed to it, and why? Log on to our class on Moodle and post your response in this week's online discussion forum. Once again, I'm Professor Grabowski. Thanks for watching, and please email me if you have any questions.